Hi again, everyone. Mark Rogers TV, voice of college football here, doing our live stream for a Monday at 6 o'clock Eastern time. Thanks for joining us. And we are just 10 days away from college football, Thursday night. And actually, we've got a few games in the Group of 5 coming up this Saturday. But for the Power 5, Thursday, August 30th. Okay. If you're locked in on the channel, you know that I'm making my way through the Power 5, previewing all the teams, doing all the predictions, and I am way behind. And I expected to make a lot of progress today, but it just didn't happen. So regardless, I have finished up the Big 12. And welcome to the chat. Welcome to the live stream. Again, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribe to the channel here for the best in college football coverage. Tons of insight, analysis from myself, but also a ton of other points of view from you. And also I bring on the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the industry. Check out the videos. All right. So again, predictions coming. I have finished up the Pac-12 and the Big 12. Now I am going to run down my wrap-up of the Big 12. And we'll see what you guys think. I just took down the Texas video. I had about 60 views in a couple hours on the Texas video. Had to pull it down. I misidentified that the Texas punter, one of the very best in the nation, Michael Dixon, was staying and was still at Texas. And I don't know where. I knew that he was moving on, and then I got mixed up. And anyway, that was in my notes that Michael Dixon was still at Texas. He is in camp with the Seattle Seahawks, so he is not in camp there at Texas, ready to defend his Texas Bowl MVP award. So I took down the Texas video. I will repost that soon. All right, also keep in mind that there are more players transferring, both as graduate transfers and otherwise in college football, than at any time in history. By far, it's not even close. You could have banked on 5 years ago, going backwards, that any decent player in college football, any starter, let alone a premium player, was always going to play for one school. One school, one player. That was the difference between collegiate sports and professional sports, where they tap danced around the league and got traded and became free agents and left, and where they went to go wherever they wanted to. That was always the difference with college football, that, hey, this is our guy. He plays for our team. He will always be a blank. He will always be a Gator. He will always be a Tiger. He will always be whatever, and he will never leave. But there are graduate transfers and transfers otherwise all over the place, and you guys know what the big names are that have moved on. And therefore, with some of my previews, basically what I do is I will just Google search Texas Tech football, and I have generally in my mind how good the team is, who the main players are, who the impact players are, where the concerns are, where the strong units are, and I'll have an idea before I look anything up where I'm headed with a particular football team, depending. I know a whole lot more about Penn State than I do Oregon State, for example, but anyway. So I go to 3 or 4 websites, or maybe more, to look up various facts and stats and player personnel breakdowns. Some of those sites posted those stories 2 days ago, like with some of the quarterback battles. I just recorded Wake Forest and Syracuse today. So I looked back to see if there was a quarterback decision made on the Wake Forest situation in place of Kendall Hinton, who was suspended for the first 3 games, just to see if that was decided. And I came across an article only 2 days old, but it's still not decided. But a lot of the information that I gathered goes back to April or May. Well, guys transferred after that. Therefore, I made a couple slip-ups where I named somebody, or in a personal breakdown, talked about somebody who has moved on. So I've made a few of those mistakes. Some people have grace, and they actually say, I get it, Mark. You're doing your research. You're 98% correct, or probably higher than that. I would hope that I'm like 99.9, like 5 nines correct, 99.999. That's an inside joke. So that I would be close to perfection, just not in terms of my analysis, but in terms of the information and the facts and the stats, but not perfect. Some guys, again, I talked about this last week. I was talking about the Nebraska quarterback situation during one of the videos. And I mentioned one of the quarterbacks that can't think of his name right now, quarterback who just transferred. And this was like 3 days after he transferred. So I missed that news. I had just had the conversation with Parker Gabriel, our Nebraska contact, and we talked up this particular quarterback just a week earlier. Then he transferred like 3 days later. I missed it. And so I was talking about him like 2 days later. A couple of people blasted me for not knowing what I'm talking about. Well, that's not the case. I do know what I'm talking about. I don't get every shred of information. All right, so we're talking Big 12 football. And again, like, comment, and subscribe. That helps us out enormously. That's what it's all about here on YouTube. We need likes, we need comments, and we need subscriptions. And then also join the mailing list for the weekly newsletter, whatever we're going to call it. We've got to come up with a good name. I don't want to call it a mailing list. I don't want to call it a newsletter. I don't want to default to the typical Mark Rogers TV insiders. We can do better than that. So if you've got a name for the newsletter, that would be great. Or a name we can call the group. And hopefully we get to triple digits by the beginning of the season. And I was thinking today that I need to do something for the honorary members. So maybe we make that kickoff of the opening Saturday. That's Saturday on September 1st. Kickoff at noon Eastern time. Everybody who's joined the group before that gets something. I don't know what that's going to be. Don't expect it to be anything huge, but it could be something. So you guys will be honorary members. You guys will be charter members. Okay, again, like, comment, subscribe, get on the mailing list, send your email address to MarkRogersTV@gmail. And I'm not going to do anything dumb with it. I'm not going to abuse it. Of course, you're going to have my email address as well, MarkRogersTV@gmail, for you to abuse it. But no garbage email, no just tons of email. There's going to be one newsletter per week that's going to arrive on Monday. It's going to be a recap of the previous weekend with stats and trends and information that you can't find other places, and also a channel update. And sure, I reserve the right at some point to send out an additional email one week because it's college football playoff selections. Let's say on Tuesday. I send out the Monday after the championship games, and then on Tuesday, the college football playoff selections come out, and then I want to send out another mailing. Afford me that additional contact with you. All right, let's get to the Big 12, and then I'll check out the chat. All right, here we go. Here's the big board. Hopefully you guys can see it. I was concerned about the Pac-12 video, as I mentioned, that you would not be able to see the board. But then I watched the video and I saw that you guys could see the board, that it looks a little bit better when it actually posts than it does in my return monitor here. All right, there's the Big 12, 2018. What do you guys think? All right, down at the bottom, we've got Kansas. Do I think Kansas is going to win a conference game this year? So in 3 years under David Beatty, they've won one conference game. They beat Texas, and that will be a joke forever on Texas. Texas needs to do a whole lot to make up for that because Kansas has not been able to beat some really bad teams, some Iowa State teams pre-2017 that were really bad. Baylor, we saw how bad Baylor was last year. Well, the Baylor Bears took care of Kansas. And, yeah, Kansas has not been able to beat anyone in 3 years in the Big 12. 1-26, but they beat Texas. So can they win another game? You know, I really don't think Kansas is going to win a game this year. When I look at their personnel and when I look at the personnel of the other team, so I started with Kansas and I thought, okay, they have some players. They have a really good running back. They have a couple really good defensive backs and linebackers. Joe Deneen in particular is an excellent Big 12 linebacker, maybe the best in the conference, 22 tackles for loss last year. So I thought, oh, they'll beat somebody. They'll beat Texas Tech or Kansas State, or they're not going to beat themselves, Kansas State or Baylor. They'll beat somebody. But then once I started to look at the other personnel and I'm considering how much Baylor could be much better this year, I thought, Kansas, I don't think they're going to beat anyone. So I think really I'm thinking 0-9. 0-9 for the Jayhawks. And based on how they performed against the group of 5 teams, like losing to Ohio last year by 15 or 20 points, are they going to beat anybody else? They have Rutgers, and I believe that game's at home. I think I overestimated Kansas. I think they're 1-11, 0-9, but I'm going to keep it there. It's on the video at 3-9. That means the 2 wins against the MAC and the FCS or whoever they play. I don't remember. They lose to Rutgers and they beat somebody. I guess it's got to be Baylor, but then who does Baylor beat? All right, let's get to Baylor. Charlie Brewer back at quarterback, as I mentioned in the video. Man, their best running back from last year, John Lovett, he's back. Terrence Williams back into the mix after gaining 1,000 yards 2 years ago. Jalen Hurd, obviously an interesting transfer as a wide receiver now. That Baylor, I believe, is going to be much improved. They're top tacklers at all 3 levels on defense. At the line position, at linebacker, in the secondary, all freshmen last year. Baylor, but it's tough to start winning games. Once you get past here, it becomes exceedingly difficult to win games if you're one of these teams. So I've got Baylor going 4-8, 2-7. They've got a home game against Duke. I could see them winning that game at home against Duke. They lost to Duke by 2 touchdowns on the road last year, but they should be much better. Duke should be about the same, maybe a bit better. So maybe Baylor, as I mentioned in the video, the ceiling, I believe, is 6-6, 3-6 in the conference. But we'll keep them at 4-8, 2-7. And again, Kansas, you might be able to notch up a win for somebody else up there, most likely Baylor, Texas Tech, or Kansas State. All right, the Red Raiders are interesting. As somebody mentioned to me after the video, and they were complimentary of the Texas Tech prediction, but said, you know, they're plug and play at quarterback and wide receiver in particular. And they do have offensive line starts coming back. But they've got to find a quarterback. They're still battling there. We outlined that scenario with Texas Tech in replacing Nick Shumanek. Yeah, with McLean Carter, Jeff Duffy, Alan Bowman's an interesting prospect, the best passer, but he's a true freshman. So the Texas Tech quarterback situation, they have to replace their productivity at running back and wide receiver. 10 defensive starters back, and the defense was pretty good last year. It wasn't awful. Sure, they got gashed a lot, but not as they typically do. They weren't a bottom 20 defense last year. They were like a bottom 50 defense. So Texas Tech and Cliff Kingsbury, I believe, really he needs to win this year. How he has kept his job going 30-33 and going 16-29 in the Big 12. When his predecessor, take out Tommy Tuberville, who went 20-17, so he kind of treaded water between Mike Leach and Cliff Kingsbury. But Mike Leach, 84-43, finished ranked in the top 25 at the end of the season 5 times in 6 years. Imagine Texas Tech doing that now, finishing ranked in the top 25 5 times in 6 years. You're talking about them suddenly being as effective as Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech finishes ranked 5 out of 6 years, maybe. That's what Texas Tech was doing under Mike Leach. They were producing like seasons to a Virginia Tech or an Arizona State going back 5 or 10 years. That's how good Texas Tech was. And they haven't done that for 7 years. Cliff Kingsbury, one more shot. Kansas State, 6-6, 4-5. The metrics, as I mentioned in the video, very interesting, where Kansas State even last year and going 8-5, winning a bowl game over UCLA, and taking some of the better teams in the conference down to a one-score game and losing, but playing that well against the Oklahomas and Texases, that Kansas State, if you look at the metrics, so we can't be completely reliant even on the advanced metrics that I think are so much more telling and so much more accurate than total yardage, that Kansas State ranked like a 4 or 5 win team across the board. They were worse than 70th in all the major defensive and offensive categories, most of them in the advanced metrics, but they somehow won 8 games because of special teams and because when they lost, besides those couple close games against the big boys at the top, they got hammered a few times, and they lost really close, and they won really close. So they weren't able to pump up their advanced metrics even against the worst teams on their conference. Like Kansas State only beat Kansas, I believe, 30-20, while everybody else was just railroading Kansas. That's all Kansas State was able to do. So I got them at 6-6, 4-5. They get back to postseason play, but not a banner year for the Wildcats. Of course, Alex Delton and Skylar Thompson are the 2 quarterbacks in play. They're kind of thin at running back, but they do have Alex Barnes, who's a good back, who should gain 1,000 yards this year. And the defense lost most of its major playmakers. And, of course, Bill Snyder, being Bill Snyder, brought in hordes of JUCO guys on defense. All right, Iowa State, interesting case here. I hate to default to the exact same record as last year, but that's really the only team I do that with here. Texas Tech was 6-7. They were 6-6 in the regular season last year. So they were close. And Iowa State's dead on to what they did last year. So I don't think last year was a fluke, but I don't think it also was some kind of huge stepping stone to greatness for Iowa State. I don't think they're Oregon in the making. I don't think they're Oregon 10 years ago in the making to be elite. But I also don't think that they're going to slip into the abyss again. I don't think they're going to be next to Kansas this year. I think that they have recruited well, and Matt Campbell's an excellent coach, 7-5, 5-4. If you look at the schedule, so I'm projecting a loss, obviously non-conference, so that would be to Iowa on the road. Last year, the 2 teams played the second or third week of the season in Ames. Overtime game, Hawkeyes won 44-41. Hawkeyes win again at home. It's difficult to win at Kinnick Stadium. So Iowa State loses that game, but they finished with a very respectable 5-4. So, you know, if chalk prevails for Iowa State, then they beat everybody below them, Kansas State, Texas Tech, and Baylor and Kansas, and they upset somebody ahead of them. Oklahoma State, most likely. But they could beat somebody else just like they did last year. You know, they beat TCU with Kenny Hill. They beat Oklahoma, of course, with Baker Mayfield. So maybe they steal a win or 2 above them. And then maybe they trip up against the Texas Tech or Kansas State, depending on home road. Oklahoma State, I think, takes a tumble. So 9-3 last year. They won the bowl game over Virginia Tech to finish with 10 wins. They tumbled to 7-5 in the regular season, 5-4. They lose so many playmakers on offense. The quarterback situation, regardless of who wins the job. Taylor Cornelius, Drew Brown, most likely the Hawaii transfer who's thrown 37 touchdowns the last 2 years. So he would be the safe and capable pick. Spencer Sanders is the guy that Oklahoma State fans are looking forward to seeing in the future. And another quarterback in play. There's 4 or 5 in play at Oklahoma State. But Drew Brown is going to be the starter. I project them to lose to Boise State week 3 at home. I think the Broncos are going to be really good, top 15 to 20 good. Might rank higher than that because they may be undefeated for a while. But legitimately top 20 good. Boise State. All right, TCU, 8-4, 6-3. That's a loss to Ohio State. I give them about a 20 to 25% chance of winning against the Buckeyes. So it would not shock me especially playing where they are, that TCU pulls off a slight upset. They'll probably be a 10 to 12 point underdog, but most likely they lose that game because TCU is one of the 15 or 20 best teams in the country, and Ohio State's arguably the best, probably the top 4. So TCU goes 6-3. So here's the fun part. Look at the Big 12 standings below Oklahoma. West Virginia, Texas, and TCU are 6-3. Somebody do a mad scramble, because I didn't realize this until I put it on the board right before I came on, that I had a 3-way tie for second place. Well, I knew that, but until I saw it, I thought, okay, tiebreaker. Where's the tiebreaker? So if you've got 2 teams, the tiebreaker is the game played between the 2 teams. But let's say Texas beat TCU, TCU beat West Virginia, and West Virginia beat Texas. Who goes? I don't know if that comes down to college football playoff ranking. I don't think it should. I think it should be some composite of points against, differential points allowed, taken from the points for in the conference, because you're talking about like opponents and how well did you play against those opponents. Then you could say, well, it's encouraging teams to drive up the score. Maybe it is, but at the same time, this is rarely going to happen. And number 2, most of the time you show the ability, if you're beating teams by, if Texas is mauling teams and they happen to lose 3 games, and one's to Oklahoma by 1 point, and they lose by a field goal to West Virginia, and they lose to Kansas State by a field goal on the road, then that's a much stronger resume than if West Virginia goes 6-3 and they got blown out 3 times by Oklahoma by 4 touchdowns. They lost a really bad game against Texas Tech by a couple touchdowns, and they lost to somebody else by 20 points. That's just Texas showing over the course of a season in 9 games against the same opponents that they're better. So I think it should be point differential. Maybe somebody on the chat can look that up. So we got, Texas, West Virginia, TCU. This would be a whole lot of fun, because I don't think it would in no way should it default to overall record. And here's why. Then you're punishing the team and penalizing the team that played the toughest non-conference schedule. And for me, that's either Texas or West Virginia, because they're playing the 2 difficult Power 5 games. For Texas, they play USC at home. They play Maryland in a quasi-road game at FedEx Field. For West Virginia, they play Tennessee and NC State. And for TCU, they just have Ohio State, which is better than the other teams that the other 2 are playing, but it's just the 1 Power 5 game. So it's more than likely that you're going to lose against a tough Power 5 non-conference schedule. Then you would be penalizing that if you take the best overall record to go to the Big 12 championship game. So I'm thinking it's a point differential call, unless, of course, head-to-head, or if one of those 3 teams, let's say Texas beat the other 2. Let's say Texas's 3 losses were to Oklahoma, Iowa State, and Kansas State, and they beat head-to-head the other 2. Well, then they should go. But if it's a free-for-all where one beat one, but the other one beat the other one, and then the other one beat the other one, then you got to go to point differential. All right, so there's the championship. Oklahoma versus, and I'll tell you in a second, but I'm going to go to the live stream and see what you guys have on the chat. And yes, if you guys have guessed that I'm up against it to get these predictions out before the season starts, you're right. And it's even kind of stupid for me to send out predictions the day before the season, because everybody's just waiting to watch football that day, and they're not going to check out a bunch of predictions. So I'm going to do much better for my own sake in building the channel, and for your sake, where I'm going to back up the schedule rankings way into the spring and knock those out sometime either before spring football or after spring football in April or May next year. And then I will get to the predictions starting, let's say, the first week of July. So I can get those out, and the last one should be released right now. August, 2 weeks left to the season. We should get the last one out there. All right, let's get to the live chat and see what you guys have. And of course, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. All right. Zoom Play likes TCU. What's the word on tech? Is Shimanek back? TCU got the best defensive line. How come they allowed 50 points a game? I agree with you, Mark. Oklahoma goes 10-2 this season. Big Bubba Blue. I can definitely see TCU in the Big 12 championship game. Of course, TCU last year lost 2 games regular season in conference. They lost to Iowa State. They lost to Oklahoma. Then they pretty much played almost a repeat of the game that they played against Oklahoma in the championship game. One of them was 38-20, the other one 41-17. Both games close, but they were like a score to 2 scores down, and then they got wiped out. All right, Zoom Play is really on TCU. 28-80, David Skinner. I'm not sure about Oklahoma State either. I have them winning 6 games. Their quarterback deal is uncertain. Shimanek is gone from Texas Tech. Yeah. So Shimanek is gone, as we mentioned. He probably joined the live stream here a little bit late. You got McLean Carter in play. He was clearly not ready to play last year, but he was forced into action a couple times. 50%, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. He did play in the Texas game in which the Red Raiders won. Jeff Duffy's a sophomore. He was a 14th rated dual threat quarterback when he came out. Alan Bowman's a freshman, true freshman, but probably the best passer and the most impressive in spring camp. Gary Patterson is a genius. I think Zoom Play may have watched my TCU video. In addition to being a big TCU guy, you're saying a lot of the things that I said in the video. Gary Patterson's done an amazing job. I think TCU has too many problems offensively to make the Big 12 championship game. So TCU's big problems: quarterback Sean Robinson, inexperienced. That doesn't mean he's not going to be good as a 4-star out of DeSoto, Texas. The offensive line is a bit rough. 3 offensive line starters back. The offensive line play could be an issue. Now, if we could get Team Mark Rogers to stand in front of the glare. What do we have to glare? We don't have the glare on the board. We get the glare over here. That really bothers everyone. Or at least maybe Thomas. David Skinner has the Mountaineers winning the Big 12, Oklahoma 2 and Texas 3. So West Virginia and Oklahoma, David, under your scenario, will play the last week of the season. And then regardless of what has to happen there to usher one of them into the championship game, or maybe nothing, maybe they're both clear-cut. Maybe one's undefeated and the other one only has 1 loss in conference. And so even though that would appear to be a big game, it's not a big game because they're both locked into the championship game, and then they turn around the next week and they got to play again. The Big 12 does not want that. I don't think they do. Dondre, good to see you. Let us know what you think of the Big 12. The Big 12 championship game this year will be either Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma, West Virginia, or Texas, West Virginia. Okay, NCIS Fanatic 21. You're giving us 3 predictions there. And if you're telling us it's going to be Oklahoma and Texas, or Oklahoma and West Virginia, or Texas, West Virginia, what about, could it not be, I guess you got the field covered there with those 3 teams. So basically you're saying it's going to be those 3 teams are going to be playing in some fashion. All right, TCU probably is the best defense in the Big 12 for what it's worth, but I don't see any of these offenses keeping up with West Virginia. Isn't that the typical line, though? We get too enamored with the team with the offense. I don't know. That West Virginia team is pretty thin. They are pretty thin. The defense is just really marginal. They were 96th last year in the advanced metrics, and they haven't really on paper given me much to determine that they should be better. David, West Virginia. Look at the Mountaineers here. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, they were 96th last year after going 46, 30, and 37 in the advanced metrics defensively. They've got two defensive ends back that are decent guys, and Reese Donahue and Ezekiel Rose. They had 5 and 6 sacks, respectively. Their other top 7 tacklers gone. They brought in Kenny Bigelow from USC, but he was always hurt at Southern Cal. Jabril Robinson from Clemson. So if guys signed at USC and Clemson, you would assume, okay, they're really good. They're really talented. They haven't worked out. They didn't work out for those teams. They weren't able to play and make it there. Josh Norwood, a corner at Ohio State, really not a highly touted one for Ohio State standards. I looked him up. He was a top 50 player at his position, not typically a guy that Ohio State would go after based on recruiting rankings, at least. David Long's a really good linebacker, 15.5 tackles for loss. Dylan Tonkery, good. But, man, the secondary, about half the secondary left from last year. This would be the conference that West Virginia could win. This would be the conference that that defense could win. But it's going to be tough. Zoom play, my college football playoff. Alabama, Clemson, TCU, and 4th spot is the toss-up. Kansas will win the Big 12. Thank you, Dondre. And just because Navy Thomas gives me the allowance, I'm going to go to the other side. It's just this is natural. This is just how I always stand on this side of the board. William, which conference is next? So I cut the Syracuse and Wake Forest videos today. So the ACC would be next, and I got to get on it, don't I? Your standings look good, Mark. You're a good analyst. I will clean up the typo there, but TCU should be at least in 2nd spot. Well, TCU, they are in the 2nd spot. I just listed those 3 teams. They're tied for 2nd, and I will let you know in just a minute who I am predicting is going to emerge from those 3. But I would love to know what the tiebreaker is for the Big 12. Texas gone. Texas gone will win the Big 12, y'all. Be hating on the Longhorns. Cash Boy D. Jesus likes the Big 12 going head-to-head with the Pac-12 every year if they add 2 teams. Okay, I'd like to see that once, but why would they do that every year? And then say, hey, look, we're the 2 worst conferences and we play each other every year. Jesus, I like where you're headed with that. It would be fun to line up all the conferences or 2 teams or teams in 2 conferences for 1 week, like an ACC, SEC kind of challenge, but not every year the same 2 conferences. All right, Buckeye State Sports. Let's run them down. He's got West Virginia 1, OU 2, Texas 3, TCU 4, then Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, Baylor, and Kansas. People like West Virginia. All right, David. More from David. I know, Mark, I'm not going off on paper. I'm going on what I seen last year. They are stronger and better than last year on offense. And West Virginia, to their credit, for defense, they did lose those final 3 games without Will Grier. He was hurt against Texas, missed the Oklahoma game. Who knows if they win that game, but at least they would have been competitive, you would think. And then they lost the bowl game against Utah. And I was really suckered into that line when I flipped it on. I knew Will Grier was not playing, but I didn't know how bad the backup was. And there was no David Sills in that game, and somebody else missed the game as well for West Virginia. Justin Crawford might not have played in that game, and they were maybe a 13-point favorite or underdog, and Utah beat them. What, they beat them like 26-10, something like that. All right, we've got West Virginia struggling on the road. 28 AD 28. He really needs me. My man all day needs me to add a win to Oklahoma because he's looking for the playoff. And he thinks, yeah, 10-2 in the Big 12, 11-2 if we win the Big 12 championship game, 11-2. Wasn't good enough for Ohio State last year. Wasn't good enough for Penn State the year before. Yeah, you might be right. I know you need that extra win. David, you would have to explain to me the comment, it's easy to go 7-5 in the Big 12. I got that. And still have a good team. Ohio State's defensive line is going to give TCU's inexperienced offensive line a bunch of fits. From NCIS Fanatic 21. Who is looking now, oh, you've got your championship game, NCIS Fanatic, who loves Oklahoma, West Virginia to meet again, have a rematch the week after for the championship, which happened 1 year in the Pac-12. Remember, Stanford, UCLA. Stanford pasted UCLA in the final game of the Pac-12 schedule. This was about 5 years ago. This was one of the very first, I think it was the first Pac-12 championship game. Stanford crushed UCLA, and then they played the very next week, and UCLA took them down to the wire, down to the last play, and Stanford kicked a game-winning field goal. So there it is. All right, I got to make a decision, and that decision is going to go to Tom Herman and the Texas Longhorns to make the Big 12 championship game. And Texas, if you watched my preview, and if you know much about Texas football, you know where they struggle. You know that my concerns are that the defensive personnel is on the roster, but it might not be ready for 2018. No Poona Ford, Malik Jefferson, Deshaun Elliott, those guys, and Holton Hill moved on to the NFL. That was the bulk of their playmakers, the guys that really made a difference, made an impact for a defense that held Baker Mayfield to 29 points, that held Oklahoma State to 10 points in regulation, that pretty much held everybody in check. Everybody. Drew Lock, 16 points in the Texas Bowl. Drew Lock in Missouri, who put up points on everybody, put up 35, I believe, on Georgia. Scored 16 points in the Texas Bowl. Unfortunately, those guys are gone that made most of the plays. Sure, they've got other guys coming back. Gary Johnson's a really good linebacker. They're going to need freshmen that are really freak freshmen, studs like B.J. Foster to step in and supplement the defensive play, make plays, and not drop off on defense and elevate the offense. The running game at Texas last year was abysmal. It can't be that bad again. Their leading rusher averaged 3.1 yards per carry. That is awful. It's unthinkable awful. Anywhere. Look up Rutgers, Kansas. Look up the worst teams in Power 5 play. Look up their leading rusher from last year. I guarantee all of them averaged more than 4 yards per carry. And Texas's leading rusher averaged 3.1 yards per carry last year. That's how bad the rushing offense was. It dropped off 100 yards per game from the previous season. Yeah, Kyle Porter, 261 on the ground, 3.1. Daniel Young will probably get the ball a little bit more, and he had a decent year. And Tennille Carter, he's in the mix as well. So Texas, what I'm banking on here is that Texas will be one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the league to start conference play. Unfortunately, after they play USC, they go into a stretch that's pretty tough. So they're going to have to get good pretty soon. Right after USC on September 15th, Texas has to deal with TCU. So that's going to play right into that. Kansas State and Oklahoma, the Red River rivalry that's always played, the Red River Shootout, sorry. Why they changed the name, I don't know, because it's tough to say. Red River rivalry. So I'm making a lot of cases for why Texas should not get to the Big 12 championship game, because I think this team is going to get better a lot further down the road in the season because of the talent on the roster. I think they have more talent. I know they have more talent than West Virginia. They've got so much more talent top to bottom on the roster than West Virginia, and significantly or decidedly better than TCU, but it's close. It's close, but I'll take Texas talent. right now on the roster, but it's young talent. It's undeveloped talent, and it's not always in the right places, right positional units. So West Virginia has a huge advantage at quarterback. Huge advantage at quarterback over two guys at Texas who have been marginal, a runner and a thrower in Ellinger and Buechele, and over a completely inexperienced guy in Sean Robinson, who threw 17 passes against Texas Tech, and that was his only meaningful time playing last year. And Texas, again, I think they're going to improve a lot in the latter stages of the season. Unfortunately for them, they've got to play two of the best teams in the conference right out of the gate. Well, really three: TCU, Kansas State, Oklahoma. So they have to win two of those games. Go to 2-1 in conference play and get past Oklahoma and TCU. And then, you know what? At 6-3, Texas could go 1-2 those first 3 weeks of the Big 12 season. They could be 1-2, and this still is in good shape. So I'm going to stay with Texas, and I'm going to expect Tom Herman to be able to develop one of those quarterbacks. Most likely it's going to be Sam Ellinger, into a decent passer by the end of the season. That by the last month of the season, that Texas's passing game is going to take off. And it's just going to, it's not going to be a Texas Tech passing game. It's not going to be Justin Herbert quality throwing from the pocket. But it's going to be considerably better, and Texas is going to take it at the end. West Virginia's got a ridiculously difficult November that they have to wade through, and I don't think they're going to make it through. So I like Texas to be ready for Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game. There's got to be an upset somewhere in college football, doesn't there? Clemson, Miami, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Alabama, Georgia, Washington's going to win the Pac-12. There's got to be an upset somewhere. There it is. Texas wins the Big 12 championship game. 30-27 over Kyler Murray and Oklahoma. Texas wins the Big 12, so they finish 10-3. And you know what that means for the Big 12. That cancels out the entire conference with 3 losses. There's my pick. Texas wins the Big 12, defeats Oklahoma, as Oklahoma is clinging to a college football playoff chance with 2 losses. Because there may be some mayhem in the Big Ten. And I've already told you that Washington's going to win the Pac-12 with 2 losses. So Washington's loving this. They're loving that. And that's the deal. There you go. Texas wins it all in the Big 12 in 2018. And maybe I jumped it a year. Maybe I jumped on the Texas bandwagon. A lot of people did that last year. I certainly didn't do it last year. But maybe I jumped ahead 1 year for Texas. The conventional pick, I could have played it safe. Oklahoma beats TCU in the Big 12 championship game. Or Oklahoma beats West Virginia in the Big 12 championship game. And, of course, that could happen. Now, let's see what you guys think of my Texas prediction. 2 losses knock the Big 12 out. No 13th data point. But they do have a 13th data point. It just won't matter. Don't mind if you win Miami. Just got to see it first. We've got George jumping in here. Marcus letting his love for a former OSU coach cloud his judgment on Texas. Yes, I'm just a big Tom Herman fan. I think Oklahoma wins at 11-2. Haven't decided if I want to put them in the playoff yet because I haven't done the Big Ten predictions. That's Buckeye State Sports. Free Urban. Mark, you are convincing me more and more that Texas will get in the Big 12 championship instead of West Virginia. I'm just throwing it out there. You guys haven't watched me enough to know if my predictions are any good. I will say 2 years ago, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Washington in the playoff. Got all 4. last year, Alabama, Ohio State, Florida State, Oklahoma State. Yeah, only got one. Ohio State should have been there. I don't remember 2014 and 15, and I haven't kept track. I could probably look back at the videos if I really wanted to and find those. And what I need to do, been thinking about this all summer, is dig up all my prediction information and throw it up there, because starting with week 1 on that Wednesday night before the Thursday opener, so a week from this Wednesday, I will release my predictions each and every Wednesday. That's my target every week. So if you joined me last college football season, you guys probably got used to me throwing up the live stream at 11:50 Eastern time, right before the noon kickoff on Saturday, and I just hauled through my predictions just to get them done and say that they're done and they're in the books and they're on video and they're time stamped and there they are, just to get them out there. And I missed a lot of Thursday and Friday games, for one thing, and secondly, I just want to deliver those each and every week. But my prediction record has been extremely good. Not an odds maker. I'm not a handicapper, so don't blow your money on me and blame me for it. But the track record's been good. I will dig up the track record and I will get that out to everyone here. Maybe I'll make that a mailing list item and save that from the masses. I'll make that an exclusive bit of information to, and I'm talking predictions going back 25 or 30 years. Long, long time. Longer than that. All right, folks. It's been fun. Big 12, there it is. Oklahoma finishes in first. Texas is selected, and we haven't even determined what the selection process is for the tiebreaker. But Texas makes the Big 12 championship game in second place, and the Longhorns, as let's say an 11-point underdog, pull off the upset against Oklahoma. Texas wins the Big 12 championship game over the Sooners and make their bid for a college football playoff selection, although with 3 losses, there would have to be mayhem, complete mayhem ensue. The All-State guy would have to show up and be in full force for Texas to make the college football playoff. All right, guys, I appreciate it. We've got Wake Forest coming. We've also got Syracuse coming, and I have to go nuts breaking down the ACC and have to do it fast. So I'm off to the job, and then on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I'm going to have to kick it into high gear on those nights to get you set with the ACC, the Big Ten, and the SEC coming, because I don't want that last video to be released when everyone's waiting for football to be kicked off and who wants to watch me ramble on about my predictions. So we want to get those out by next Monday. I want to get everything out. So turn off the notifications if they're going to drive you nuts, because they're going to be flying fast and furious. Like, comment, subscribe. Most of you have, so I appreciate it. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. You guys make it all happen. You encourage me with your support. I don't mind the debate. I love the debate, so that doesn't mean stop debating. You can argue, point out my mistakes. If you don't think I really delivered on any particular video, or you have something to say, certainly let me know. Let me have it. That's what's fun about this, is the debate of college football. But if you like the channel, please like the videos as well. Like them. You can still debate with me, but like the videos and comment and subscribe. And again, I think I'm preaching to the choir, so I'll let you guys know that if you have friends and family and acquaintances out there that love college football, let them know Mark Rogers TV is here, and we are going to blast away at the 2018 season, and we could not do it without you. We will see you next time. I have a live stream scheduled for Tuesday night at 10 o'clock Eastern time with Arizona's Zona Zealots, Shireen Ryan. I am thinking about canceling that live stream because I have so many videos to produce that it's unrealistic for me to continue to set up these live streams and still try to knock out these videos at the same time to get the previews and predictions done by the end of the weekend. So I may or may not be on with the live stream after that, What you will see are the ACC predictions, followed by my ACC wrap-up from the big board. And we will see you guys next time. Again, send me your email to MarkRogersTV@gmail.com, and we'll get you on the mailing list for the big newsletter. And you can leave your suggestion on what we should name this freaking newsletter that I'm going to start week 1 of the college football season. We'll see you guys next time.